So as parents, we want our kids to be resilient, right? To bounce back after they've been met or face a challenge. Well, my next guest says this is especially important for young athletes who might face defeat often. Psychologist Dr. Golightly says that what our athletes need most is a sense of mental toughness so that the next time they experience a loss, they can rise above it. He's sharing how we can teach our kids to be more mentally tough. Great to see you, Tom, as always. And I love this topic. I was thinking why it was such a break tap for me. And I found myself thinking, and I'm, you know me, the athlete I am. But I found myself thinking, like in sports, that phrase toughen up has sort of been abandoned over the years, and for good reason, right? We've become, I think, more respectful and appropriate about how we're talking toward athletes and talking about the sport in general. But the idea of mental toughness, that's a worthy conversation to have.
It is, and you know, I think poise is a little bit of a lost art, so it doesn't have to be such a, how do I want to say this? It doesn't have to have a negative connotation to tough through something. It's just like, hey, let's stay calm and figure some things out. And then we can kind of go forward from there. And so mental toughness is really the ability to manage external distraction as well as internal thoughts and feelings that come up. And so there's kind of two parts there, right? There's how do I almost think about nothing when I have to absolutely be in the present. And the other part I'm stealing from a colleague of mine who I value a lot at University of Mississippi, Dr. Josie Nicholson. She kind of talks about mental toughness being remembering who you are when it's difficult. And so when difficulty shows up, can we remember who we are and what we bring to the table? And I think that's a really cool definition of toughness.
That is a cool definition that applies to all of us. But as we focus our words today on the parents of young athletes and how they might coach up the mental toughness inside their kids. Why is that important, Tom, for athletes specifically?
So what studies have shown is that athletes that exhibit mental toughness, they achieve more, they stay consistent in staying in sport, and they find more meaning in their sport. So it's not just about success, it's about demonstrating some persistence and some resilience as you move through kind of the ranks.
I'm eager to hear about your ideas here and how we can coach up our kids and teach them this mental toughness that you described so well. First, you say we've got to remind them it's okay to struggle.
So I work with a lot of athletes, and I want to get to know them and their why. You know, why do they participate? And so many of them I say, well, what do you love about playing? And the first thing I say is winning. But
Good answer.
If that was it, then you just keep playing a bunch of third graders and cream them all the time. So it's about more than just winning, right? And what we see on TV are athletes that have perfected things over years and years and hours of struggle. We don't see the struggle, we always see the finished product. So a lot of times our young athletes are like, why am I struggling with this? And reminding them that it's okay to struggle. The only time we're really defeated is when we don't learn from the feedback and that growth mindset that comes from struggle, that all feedback is fine feedback. Successes are fine and failures are fine. What do we learn from them? How do we self-assess? So helping your young athletes self-assess and kind of figure out, hey, what are some things that you can do from here, even when it's a perceived failure, can really help them stick with sport and stick with performance.
Well said. Flexibility, you say, is an important component of being mentally tough.
Yes, so life goes according to plan, doesn't it?
Always.
Like every day.
100%.
Every show goes according to plan. We can plan all we want, and then things go sideways. Can we invite a little bit of flexibility? And helping our young athletes look at this, and even as you're watching sports on TV, point it out.
Okay, I was going to say, because how do we teach flexibility? It's one thing to be flexible, but how do we teach it?
You can see it in almost every performance. I mean, you got playoff games with hockey and basketball right now. Look at the teams, and what they're doing in the first quarter is often not what they're doing in the fourth quarter, the first period, third period. But point out when you see this, right? And some of the classic performances that we see are come from struggle. Like they were happening a few years ago in the Super Bowl. Tom Brady losing 28-3 wins the Super Bowl, right? Like he had to adapt. He had to be flexible. What was planned wasn't working. How do you say, well, this is what I do well, and I'll just shift a little bit, and if I shift into this mode, I can still bring a strength, but it might not be I thought I was going to have to bring
So
it in.
call out those good examples. I think that's such a good lesson across the board, no matter what we're talking about, from sportsmanship to mental toughness, but being vocal about these sports events we're taking in and using them as a teaching moment. In pursuit of mental toughness, you want parents to problem solve with their athlete. What does that look like?
So a lot of times we save our kids. And I saw this, I think it was last week, Heather Johnson was talking about, like, hey, let them struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
And we can't save them from consequences. Now, I'm not saying throw your kid into the sports deep end, but I am saying, like, it's okay to, like, look at a problem and help them solve the problem. For example, a kid comes home and says, you know, I'm just not the fastest on my team and I'm really frustrated. Okay, you might not be the fastest on your team, but what do you bring to your team? What strength do you have? We all have individual strengths. There's one fastest, but there's other things. And often coaches, especially at a club level or an elite level, they're looking for fit. They're not looking for everyone to be the fastest player on the team. So help them kind of see how they can solve the problems and do those things. And the elite athletes are able to really do that on the fly pretty well, solve their own problems. But if we rush in, change clubs, try to save the problem, they're not going to grow that.
Give me a quick 30 seconds on this one. Encourage them to face fears and face their emotions.
So a lot of times doubt and fear kind of creep in, and there's a lot of emotion that kind of flies at our faces. We got to have some courage. Like, I don't know how it's going to play out, but if we have the courage to just face it, then we're really, really experiencing some toughness.
And to teach toughness, we have to show toughness.
It's okay that we have struggles and let them know what's going on. My mom is in her 70s. She's learning how to play violin. It's pretty impressive, right? And I'm like, that's awesome. And it's not easy, and I see her struggling with it. You know, how many are out there training for marathons or 10Ks? Let your kids know, yeah, it's hard for me sometimes to get up in the morning and do this, but I do it, and I like doing it. And we feel that sense of accomplishment by doing hard things.
I really like this topic, and as always, I appreciate your advice and the conversation we have. Tom, thank you so much.
You're welcome.